Hey, it's Wednesday. Acts 20 is what we're covering right now. It's a fun little chapter. A lot of stuff going on. When we left Acts 19, there was that big riot that was going on, and they started yelling, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," and that kind of stuff. And that ended, the clerk ended it. After that, Paul decides he's going to take off, and he's going to go visit the churches in Macedonia and Greece. We're not quite sure how he got there. Probably sailed. Probably went up to Troas and over. Went to the places here, but the only one mentioned is Macedonia, which is the area, right? Macedonia. And then he heads on down to, he calls it Greece, which would also be Achaia, but let's just call it Greece, because that's what he called it, this area. And in Greece, we know the two leading cities there are Corinth and Athens. So let's say he comes down to Athens and Corinth, and it says he spends that's the abbreviation for months, 3 months there. And then there's a plot to kill him again, okay? The Jews getting jealous and that kind of thing, because he was going to sail across the Aegean Sea. Remember all these islands in here? But he hears about a plot, so he decides not to. Well, why would he just all of a sudden not go by boat then if there's a plot to kill him? Well, if he's on a boat, they might be able to get him a lot easier. Throw him off the edge of the boat. You can do a lot out at sea that, you know, the officials aren't going to see. The other thing we find out later, it's not mentioned here, is he's taking a lot of money with him. He's gathering collections of money from these rich places. Ephesus, Corinth, Athens, very wealthy compared to the Christians back in Jerusalem over here. They were having it rough, and there was a famine there at the time, we hear. So he's gathering money. So he's like a walking bank, and they hate him already. So it was not a real restful time for Paul traveling. Then they mention his buddies that are with him, and I think that's good. That it's good that Luke mentions that, because what it displays is where these people are from and how diverse the following of Jesus is. He says Sopater, who's from Berea. Got my list here. And Berea would be out here. He's got Aristarchus and Secundus from Thessalonica, which would be right here. He's got Gaius from Derbe, way over there. He's got Timothy from Lystra, next to Derbe, right there. He's got Tychicus and Trophimus from Asia, which could be anywhere in here, probably Ephesus, but people from all over the place. Okay? When they're traveling back with his buddies, so they're going back this way, they stop in Philippi, and they have Passover there. They're going to celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They're going to celebrate Passover. The rest of the guys go over to Troas to meet him. So, and then it says they take 5 days. So he probably spent the time with Lydia and probably the jailer who let him go after the earthquake and stuff, and all those guys there. And then they come across. So it takes 5 days to come across. Probably hit Samos or Samothrace, and then over probably both directions. And then he gets to Troas, and I think I mentioned it in the other video. Paul is the Michael Jordan of being an apostle. No, I should say it the other way. Michael Jordan's the Paul of basketball. Just so intense, going after it so long. And it really comes out in this story because he's talking all night, and some dude falls out, his name is Eutychus, falls out of a 3rd-story building, bang, and dies. And Paul runs downstairs, they all go down there, and Paul puts his arms around him, says, "Don't be alarmed, he's alive." He comes back to life. What does Paul do after that? Keeps on preaching till morning. And you kind of get a sense from Luke, the way he says it here, says, then he went upstairs again and broke bread and ate. After talking until daylight, he left. All right? Earlier it says, a man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. Maybe even Luke was saying, oh, please, Paul, let it rest for tonight. But we know that Paul is so intense, no matter where he's going with his, every breath he's got, he's bringing the word. It even reflects next, because from Troas, then what they do is they start going to all these different towns. The next one's Assos. I know you're laughing about that. But Assos, the land goes in like that, and Assos is like 50 miles away from Troas. And they could take the ship around to it, and everybody does, except for Paul. Paul walks it. He walks the 50 miles. Why? Well, he might run into more believers or more people who might be hungry for the truth. And that way he gets to say it to even anybody else. He was preaching all night long. So long, a guy fell out and died, and he raised him from the dead. God did, through Paul. And then the next morning, instead of getting on the boat and taking the easy way around, he walks 50 miles for the next couple of days so that he can spread the gospel more. I mean, the guy's just relentless. That's the way I describe him. That's the way I describe MJ. I mean, really, that is who he is. And then it's Assos, he hits a whole bunch of them there in a row. Mytilene, which is on an island. And then he keeps on going. And you can see all these different spots. It's Chios, and then Samos, and then Miletus. Now, Miletus, I mentioned that on the last video, is just below Ephesus. And so they come down the coast here, and they go to Miletus. And he sends for the elders of the church in Ephesus to come down and meet him. Because he doesn't want to spend time in Ephesus, because he doesn't want to get held up, because he wants to be back in Jerusalem by the time of Pentecost. Well, if he celebrated the Passover here, then he needed 50 days to get to Jerusalem. And what kind of, travel takes 50 days? Well, back in those days, he already spent an extra week there, and then 5 days across, and then who knows how many days walking to Assos, and then how many days on the ship coming down here, going to Miletus, and how many days did it take for the Ephesian elders to come down and meet him, and then he's got to go all the way across the sea here. It's going to take a while, and he's kind of in a hurry. And he doesn't want people to hold him up in Ephesus. People who like him, who want him to stick around, and people who don't like him. Remember those trinket makers that, for Artemis. So he talks to these guys, and he tells them, I'm not going to see you again, and all this kind of stuff, and they start breaking down and crying. We actually find out later, that's not from the Lord, like he saw a vision or something. The Lord told him he wasn't going to go back. He just said, yeah, I'm probably not going to see you again. He actually, according to, I think, Titus or Timothy, he does actually go back to Ephesus again. But anyway, then he takes off from there, and he heads back towards Jerusalem. That is in chapter 21, so I will wait to talk about that when he leaves Miletus. One thing I want you to do, though, if you got some time, okay, is I would love you to research the gates of Miletus. The Germans have it in a big, huge archaeological museum. There's also a place up here called Pergamum. That's where Luke is from, because Luke is a doctor. It's like the grand medical center of all centers, and the huge sacrificial place that was up there. The Germans took that apart and put that in an inside museum too. So check both of those out.